Thank you, Carla, and our interpreters. Tonight's meeting will consist of an introduction to our panelists, a presentation overview of the proposed project, followed by a public comment session. If you have a question or public comment, please put your full name in the chat and we will call on you once the presentation is completed. There is no need to put your comment in the chat, just your name to form a queue. If you were unable to give comment at the last meeting, please put your name in the chat now. If you gave comment at the last meeting, please help us make room for those who haven't yet spoken. If we run out of time, we will be collecting comments after the meeting via an end of meeting survey. And now I will turn the meeting over to HSH Executive Director, Shireen McSpadden.
Thank you, Deborah. And thank you everyone who is taking valuable time out of your schedule tonight to be here. I know this is a really important issue for many people. And this is the second meeting that we are doing to really hear from the community about your thoughts and feelings about the Buchanan Hotel and putting permanent supportive housing there. So I think we had a really good meeting last week. We heard a lot from the community. We want to continue that process. And as I said last meeting, for those of you who were here, this is the beginning, last week and this week are the beginning of our community process here. So we are looking forward to hearing from you. We are also looking forward to sharing some answers for you. I want to thank all of you who gave us questions last week in the chat. And verbally, and then many of you who wrote to us and talked about your concerns and your questions. And I want to thank our external affairs team for putting together all of those questions and coming up with answers. I know they worked really hard this week to give as comprehensive answers as possible, and that should be available to everyone. So hopefully that'll give you some of the information that you need before you ask your question. And I just want to get us started. I'm here to listen throughout the meeting, and I appreciate your time and attention. And I know this is a very serious and emotional issue for a lot of people. So thank you. Deborah, back to you.
Thanks, Shireen. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Emily Cohen.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Cohen. I'm the Deputy Director for Communications and External Affairs at the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. I'm going to be giving a brief slide presentation to start us off tonight. For those of you who were here previously, I appreciate you bearing with us. I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to hear the facts of the proposal before we take questions and comments. So thank you very much. We've already gone through public comment instructions, but please do put your name in the chat if you have a question or comment, and we will call on folks, and everyone will have 2 minutes to make a comment. We will be collecting questions and updating our FAQ document based on the questions. As everyone I'm sure is very well aware, we have an extreme affordable housing crisis in our community. And this most significantly impacts our highly vulnerable residents and people experiencing homelessness. Every day, our community has over 8,000 people who are unhoused. And the city and county provides housing and shelter to over 14,000 people every night, but we know that we are still unable to meet all of the need in our community. We have a really unique opportunity right now to expand our capacity of housing for people with significant housing needs, people experiencing homelessness. And it's a really unique opportunity because we have the confluence of new state dollars for permanent supportive housing, as well as new local resources, and a significant effort from City Hall to expand permanent supportive housing with the goal of acquiring or leasing 1,500 new units of housing. When we talk about who is experiencing homelessness, who would be housed in our community, homelessness largely affects seniors, largely affects local San Franciscans, Bay Area residents. Homelessness is directly correlated to affordability and income inequality. As we have seen housing costs rise nationally, we have seen homelessness increase significantly. This is the racial and social justice issue of our time. And we also know that treatment of all kinds is most effectively achieved when people have the stability of a home. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about tonight. We have a proposal at the city to acquire 4 properties to expand permanent supportive housing. And these properties are in 4 different neighborhoods across the city. You can see them sort of identified on the map here. And, I do want to reiterate that this is a proposal. This is a first step in acquiring new properties for the purpose of permanent supportive housing. I want to answer a few questions that we've received about what permanent supportive housing is. This is an affordable housing opportunity. Tenants will be, they're not shelter residents. Folks who will be there will be tenants. They will have leases of their own, and this will be their long-term home. This is really what it sounds like. It is long-term housing that is affordable with on-site social services to help ensure that the tenants remain stably housed for the long term. The city currently operates 10,000 units of permanent supportive housing units for 10,000 San Franciscans, families, transitional age youth, and adults. And we have been incredibly successful with this approach. This is one of the most effective tools we have for ending homelessness. We have really low turnover out of permanent supportive housing. The model includes 24/7 staffing, on-site social services, professional management. And I do want to reiterate that while shelter is an important part of our strategy for serving people experiencing homelessness, what is before you today is not a shelter proposal, but a permanent housing proposal. Permanent housing is incredibly effective at stabilizing people's lives, people's health, and is ultimately the foundation from which we are all able to succeed. And, I want to tell a very quick story about Brenda, who is one of our new permanent supportive housing tenants. She had been on the streets for many years, and through the pandemic, we were able to bring her into one of our shelter-in-place hotels. And through that process, we connected her with housing, and she has really stabilized. And when I talked to her about her favorite part of living indoors and living in stable housing, it was about cooking meals. And she went on and really talked about how important it was for her to cook. And that struck me as just a really important fact of housing and the stability that it provides. So we've also received lots of questions about why this property, why 1800 Sutter Street, what is this property? Why has this been selected for permanent supportive housing? The city issued a request for information to property owners throughout San Francisco to assess interest in selling their properties to the city for this purpose. In response to that RFI, we collected information about many buildings, and this, along with the other 3 that we are proposing, came to the top because of it's a really high quality building. It's currently functioning as a shelter-in-place hotel. It has amenities that make it very attractive to become housing, including private bathrooms, on-site meeting rooms and offices, close proximity to social services and public transit, as well as community space. So for the amenities that we look for in buildings to acquire for housing, 1800 Sutter had many of the things that we are looking for. So I did want to talk a little bit about the timeline and next steps. As you can see, we are in the process of community engagement. This is our second listening session, and we look forward to hearing from all of you today. Should this project move forward, it would have to go through approval from the Board of Supervisors, which would include a budget and finance hearing and a full vote of the board, as well as approval from the mayor. Simultaneous to that process, the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing would be selecting a service provider. So should this project go forward, we will work with homeless service providers and permanent supportive housing operators to identify the right provider for this site. So I've also received many questions about who will run the site, and we do not yet have a provider identified. We will be going through a public process for that. And so I will stop there. I know that there have been lots of questions about, when will this proposal be introduced to the Board of Supervisors? And I just want to be very clear with folks tonight that we have not introduced this to the Board of Supervisors. We are committed to an ongoing and thorough community engagement process, and that is the process we are in right now. So we are here today to listen. We will continue to have conversations and dialogue with members of the Japantown community, and we look forward to continuing that as the next phase of this process. So thank you very much. Before opening it up to public comment, I did want to invite Supervisor Preston, if he is on the line, to join us to make a few remarks.
Thanks so much. And yes, I am here and don't want to take up much time because really I know the purpose is to get community feedback. So just really wanted to thank you for hosting this second meeting. Also wanted to recognize Japantown for Justice, which hosted a meeting last week. And thank you, Deputy Director Cohn, for answering, I think, a lot of really detailed questions very transparently at that meeting last week. I think that was really, really helpful. So just appreciate everyone taking the time at the prior two meetings and now this third one, the second one being held by HSH, and looking forward to the conversation as the city decides what the next steps are here for acquiring sites for permanently supportive housing. And folks can always reach out directly to our office, Preston staff at sfgov.org. And I believe my legislative aide who works on Japantown issues, Kyle Smealy, is on as well. So looking forward to your comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleagues, Denny and Deborah, who are going to lead us through the public comment phase of the meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us. The first person to speak for public comment will be Jose Gonzalez Brenes. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Jose. I'm a homeowner and resident of Japantown, and I support this city initiative very strongly. I actually was very surprised that this shelter-in-place hotel has been running for over a year. I walked past it many, many times and didn't even know that it was providing this social service to our community. I was very pleasantly surprised, as many other homeowners and neighbors. Like when I first heard of this initiative, I was like, oh, I wonder how this would change the neighborhood. Turns out that it's been running for a while. I've never seen anything remotely strange. I am very sad to have heard so much opposition to this project in the last meeting. I don't know why business and homeowners prefer to have people living on the streets than under dignified conditions. And I'm very saddened that a lot of these comments make people that live in homelessness sound like they're criminal or dangerous. Just in the chat, somebody said, what about mental health? But nobody says, what about the mental health of hotel guests? People that live in homelessness are more often than not victims of crime and not perpetrators of crime. People that live in homelessness are just like us. Just one paycheck away from, most people in San Francisco live only one paycheck away to become homeless. I think it's very sad that we're the way that a lot of us talk about our neighbors, like if they're dangerous or criminals. They're just people like us. I hope that the city doesn't hear these complaints, because I think I would be very saddened to have these people kicked out of temporary shelter and back to the streets. And I don't know how homeowners or business owners would prefer to have them in tents or in sidewalks than in dignified conditions. Thank you so much for organizing this.
Thank you for your comment.
Our next speaker is Robert Fruchtman.
Hi, thanks. My name is Robert Fruchtman. I live in District 5. I firmly believe that housing is a human right, and that permanent supportive housing is one of the best ways, if not the best, of ending our homelessness crisis. If we leave people on the street, we are not living up to our progressive ideals as a city. We should not leave people on the street where they cannot get help. I live in Lower Haight, where I do see homeless people on the street, and we do have a lack of affordable and permanently supportive housing. I feel like if we had a place for people to go, we would not see people on the street suffering, and it really pains me. So when I see that some discussion around the economic viability of the hotel, we are reducing the economic and social viability of San Francisco as a city. We can have more residents in Japantown. We can build another hotel, but we won't get another opportunity like this for it's basically free money. So I think we should use it to prioritize people without homes over the idea that maybe, but we don't know what the economic impact will have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Judy Hamaguchi.
Yes, thank you. I see that there are nearly 100 people in the queue, and I would give my 2 minutes to the next person.
Thank you, Judy. Curtis Wu.
Hey everyone, my name is Curtis Wu. I'm a Japantown resident. I fully support this project. As a resident, I fundamentally believe that long-term residents actually do more to support local businesses and community than any tourist could. The reason businesses suffered so much in the first place because it was largely due to we heavily invest in tourism. So I also don't think a majority of people who patronize Japantown are necessarily staying in hotels. I go to that area once every other day. I grew up going there as a kid. People are coming from outside of the region, other parts of the city, and I also think it speaks volumes that the owner of the hotel wants to sell. It kind of shows the viability is maybe not what it used to be. Building affordable housing is our collective responsibility. And I'm just honestly really saddened that all this anti-homeless rhetoric, and I just want to call something out, especially in the last meeting, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not anti-homeless, but, and then they say a bunch of anti-homeless tropes. Oh, I'm not anti-homeless, but. I'm sorry, if you say that, that's anti-homeless. Like, you just because you put that qualifier at the front doesn't change it. So, it's just really sad because something similar happening in the Sunset, not a hotel, but it just saddens me that too, specifically like Asian communities and more marginalized communities are pitting against another marginalized community. And I just to say that's a tactic. A lot of people use people in power to pit people who actually have a vested interest in supporting each other because it distracts us from the top. So it's just sad. And I just want to say, I don't think we need and should have the people on the street if the sale doesn't go through. I think people who are against, I read it wrong. I think we need to have the people who would actually be living in there to come to this meeting. I want people who are against it to meet and talk to the people who are going to be on the street if the sale doesn't go through. We're all calling, I'm assuming most of us don't think twice about our housing security. So it's easy for us to say it when people are going to be on the street. So I think we have a moral obligation. I'm getting a little emotional because I'm just honestly really sad that it's come to this. And I think we have to have positive conversations or productive conversations. And I think part of that really is hearing from the people who are going to be affected, not from, so we need to have business owner and
Thank you very much, sir. We're at time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Salim Damarji and then Kristen Evans. Salim.
Hi, I'm Salim. I was a tenant in District 5 as of Monday, but now I'm between leases. I've had close family experience homelessness, a close friend too. And I believe strongly that housing is a human right. It's a basic necessity. And in a city as rich as San Francisco, it is abhorrent that we have neglected homeless people as much as we have. And I have to admit, hearing the amount of pushback from people who have homes complain about this project, I'm honestly trying not to make, I'm trying not to express the full extent of how upsetting it is to hear that. Anyone who understands what it's like to be homeless whether that's through another person or through their own personal experience, would, I think, really push back on that. So please don't delay this project with more community meetings. We should not be subjecting a human right to terms and conditions or to a vote or to a popularity contest. While we're on the Zoom call comfortably, there are people who are living on the street right now. And the real question is, whose concerns matter more? I thought my representative, Supervisor Preston, believed that housing was a human right. Turns out he thinks it's less important to house the homeless immediately than it is to hear from people with homes, shape the lives of people who don't have homes. We all know that there's no alternative to this project. We're going to lose this money if we don't move forward with the site. Please approve this project as quickly as you can. There really shouldn't be a community meeting for a human right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen Evans, and then Jennifer Friedenbach. Kristen.
Hello, my name is Kristen Evans. Tonight I'm speaking for myself, but I do wear a number of hats, including I'm a District 5 resident and a small business owner, and I also served as a proponent for Proposition C to create real solutions to homelessness in our city. I respect the cultural sovereignty of the Japantown neighborhood, and I applaud the city for rethinking their outreach process to be more responsive to the community and still looking for that path forward to secure housing for an urgent need that existed before the pandemic. It's an urgent need that existed before the pandemic, but also exists especially now during the pandemic for our unhoused neighbors. I also have great empathy for Japantown small businesses. In the Haight-Ashbury, our small businesses have similarly struggled with a drop of tourism, and I can certainly understand those who are struggling and whose future are uncertain. I know that the federal, state, and city governments have tried to work to provide aid opportunities and grants and loans, and I hope that the Japantown merchants can find a path forward if they do lose this hotel. And I also know through my volunteer work, many of the shelter-in-place hotel residents who really desperately desire a home to call their own. They include many good people and desirable neighbors, people I would be happy to have in my neighborhood. In the Haight-Ashbury, I've supported having affordable housing and shelter homes for formerly homeless individuals at the 730 Stanton lot. And I do think that we all individually as San Franciscans have to look and figure out how can we be part of the solution to address this crisis that has really affected so many of our unhoused neighbors. I'm gonna just stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Friedenbach, and then Michiko Yamada.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jennifer Friedenbach. I'm the director of the Coalition on Homelessness. Just want to acknowledge that people have been really frustrated, in Japantown leaders in particular, around the process, feeling that it hasn't been inclusive and has really brought forward a lot of these standing injustices that the community there has faced. I really feel strongly that we should not let them divide us. This doesn't have to be a false choice. It doesn't have to be an either or of choosing supportive housing or saving Japantown. There's a way to do both. This project creates a lot of leverage for Japantown to really get some long-standing needs met. There's a list of things that can happen. We can do both, and Japantown can welcome beautiful new neighbors into the area, whether it's having an anchor store, whether it's things at the project around putting in a speed bump, having leaders from Japantown on the selection committee for who gets the grant, making sure that any loss in tourist dollars can be replaced by a whole host of different endeavors that can be done to replace those in an ongoing way. This is something that is incredibly needed. This building is a really beautiful opportunity. The funding for this can be matched by the state. The state puts a really short timeline on these Project Home Key situations. And so that's why the process is moving so fast. It's not a conspiracy against Japantown or anything like that. It's just the city's bad at public process. Sorry, people from the city. And also it's a really fast grant that's coming down. We can, really, we're talking about D5 where there has been massive displacement, Western Addition, Fillmore, and Japantown. When I walk into a shelter in San Francisco and I start talking to folks, I'm constantly meeting people who are
Jennifer,
from.
we're at time. Thank you so much. Thank you
And
for
this-
your comment. We're
this
at
is an
time.
opportunity to come home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michiko Yamada, and then Priya Gupta.
Thank you, Danny. So my name is Michiko Yamada, and I'm a longtime Japantown resident, and I oppose the sale of the Hotel Buchanan. As a native San Franciscan, I'm supportive of homeless housing. However, the Hotel Buchanan is not the appropriate location. Prior to the pandemic, the Hotel Buchanan had an occupancy rate of over 85%. The loss of tourists and foot traffic would have a dire financial and economic impact on the businesses in Japantown, many which are small, family-owned, single entity businesses. There is only one Benkyodo. There is only one Super Mira, only one Paper Tree in all of San Francisco. These are the types of businesses that will be impacted. Prior to World War II, Japantown encompassed 40 blocks. After redevelopment, we became 14 blocks. We have now been whittled down to 4 blocks. Every building, every business, every home that is taken away is a loss to this community, is a blow to Japantown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Priya Gupta, and then Zach Lipton. Priya?
Thank you. I am a resident of Japantown, though not originally from here. We have made this our home. My children go to school in this neighborhood. They're growing up here. They play in the playgrounds, and we shop locally here. And I'm in support of this proposal. What I heard last week from the city was that a shelter-in-place hotel is different to permanent supportive housing. One of them was about addressing an immediate public health crisis and moving folks off the street. And that might not necessarily have had all of the supports in place that those folks needed to stabilize. But what I heard was that with permanent supportive housing, they would have the support and stability that they would need to stabilize and thrive. And in the same way that you've made space to welcome me in the community, I would love for us to do that for our other neighbors too. The other thing that I heard is that current solutions haven't worked because of the scale of the crisis. And so this is an opportunity to be bold and different, especially considering the resources that are available. And with equitable access to housing and the resources that folks need, then we can invite these folks to be part of our beautiful, diverse, and thriving community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Zach Lipton, and then Katie Yukawa. Zach?
Hi, good evening. Zach Lipton in strong support of this project and all 4 sites across the city. I'll be upfront and say I don't live in Japantown. I live south of Market, very near the similar supportive housing project that's planned in our neighborhood. And I firmly support supportive housing in my own neighborhood. And I'm frankly frustrated that people across the city want to put supporting housing in my neighborhood, yet you reject it in yours. When you say you want supportive housing, but not in your neighborhood, what I hear you saying is you want it in my neighborhood. And I do too. I've spoken up for that and I will continue to do so because I believe it's the right thing to do. But I want to know why you think the moral obligation to care for our neighbors is my neighborhood's responsibility and not yours. And I know that if you're able to reject this project in your neighborhood, my neighbors will use that to fight against supportive housing here too. And our city will get no housing and leave more of our neighbors living and struggling on the streets. This housing is a city-wide responsibility and all 4 projects should move forward together. I'm a San Francisco native. I've been coming to Japantown since I was a toddler. It means a lot to me, and I know I'm only able to enjoy it because this community has fought for so long to preserve it and make it thrive. I don't want to minimize that. And I know Japantown small businesses, some of my favorite places in the city, are really struggling now and need more help and rent forgiveness and assistance from the city to recover from this pandemic. But our city just has so many people who need a roof over their heads, and it's wrong to leave them on the streets and not do everything we can to respond to that emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie Yukawa, and then David Ishida. Katie?
Hi there, my name is Katie Yukawa. I'm a fourth generation Japanese American and San Franciscan, and I was raised in Japantown. My family has been a part of this community for generations with our family auto repair business. And I live in Japantown, as does my uncle. He was born in the Rower, Arkansas internment camp in 1943. I oppose the site because of its location. I am an ICU nurse, and I am in favor of housing and services for the homeless. This project harms Japanese businesses and will result in the erasure of a cultural community that has been here for generations. This plan exploits the financial misfortunes of Japantown during this pandemic and seeks to take away a vital resource. To be frank, in the 60s and 70s, the city kneecapped Japantown and made it dependent on tourism. And now they are attempting to do it again by taking away one of its only 2 hotels. This is government inefficiency, it's amnesia at best, and cruelty at worst. Japantown is one of the last places in the country that acknowledges the post-World War II Japanese Americans that survived incarceration, including my grandparents and my great-grandparents. This plan further encroaches upon the Japanese American community, one that has already been whittled down to a mere 4 blocks. Dean Preston, please do not forget that this is also a part of your legacy. Will you disregard the Japanese American community as many others have before you? Will you follow in the footsteps of elected officials whose actions show that Japanese Americans do not matter? This is my family's history that you risk erasing. They were here and they matter. My uncle, who still lives here, a man born behind a barbed wire fence, he matters. These businesses matter. Please show that San Francisco values this Japanese American history. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Ishida, community member, long time, over 50 years of volunteerism in San Francisco, Japantown. I want to say that I'm very familiar with Director McSpadden since the 1980s. In a prior work life, I ran the Commission on the Aging, so I am extremely knowledgeable of supportive housing for seniors. I am in support of supportive housing for seniors, but not this proposal in Japantown. There are many, many city departments that Japantown works with: Department of Public Works, Recreation and Parks, City Planning, Cultural Preservation, the Arts Commission. I don't know if I said the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth and Families, Neighborhood Services, and on and on and on. I don't know what type of communication was done between Shireen's department and all of these other departments. We've been working with all of them in a concerted way for the last 20 years, and about cultural and heritage planning, coming up at the urging of the city to develop a Japantown Community Benefit District. We've been working with the Japantown Task Force to develop a cultural heritage plan, and on and on and on. So with all due respect to the housing advocates, I appreciate your passion. I think that many of us also support your ideals, but you need to understand that for us to be able to maintain a Japantown takes hard work. It takes money, it takes commitment, it takes people with a vision to help ensure that we remember what went on historically in the past so that we don't make these same mistakes. 21 years ago to this month, we lost the Japantown.
Thank you very much. We're at time. Thank you so much for your public comment.
Don't forget the Japantown Bowl, Kintetsu Enterprises that lost that property, and now Kimpton Corporation.
Thank you very much,
wants to
sir.
do the
We're
same
trying to
thing.
give everyone a chance to speak. Thank you so much for your public comment. Denny?
Kiyomi Takeda, and then Lori Yamauchi. Kiyomi Takeda, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kiyomi Takeda, and I'm a second and fourth generation Japanese American born and raised in San Francisco. I, like many others, have been struggling with this issue, as I truly believe that everyone does deserve access to housing. And with this being said, I recognize that this situation has challenged us all to take a hard look at what we stand for and what we're passionate about. And I am passionate about the sustainability of Japantown and want to stress the importance of how we need to uplift the voices of the members of our community. I'm here as the granddaughter whose family was stripped of everything and interned in Topaz and Tule Lake. As a mother of two, one of who attends the incredible preschool right next to the hotel, an organizer that volunteers and puts on events to draw thousands to our neighborhood to uplift the businesses and organizations and cultural groups of our community, many who do rely on the hotel, and as a young leader who envisions a more inclusive Japantown. We're hearing hundreds of stories and emotions from people of the community, and regardless if you agree with them or not, we have to respect their stories, as these are the faces and real people who make Japantown what it is. I imagine an ideal Japantown that is inclusive and invites all communities to share in the beauty of our neighborhood. However, it's really hard to envision that if there's no chance that there's a chance that our community will be gone. As a young person who was involved in the Better Neighborhood Plan and trying to make it accessible, how many plans and documents do we have to go through and produce before the city actually listens? And what is the point? If you really want to know what Japantown wants, simply listen. I would like to see that the city actively puts forth the effort to listen and understand and act upon the unique and individual efforts and needs of the Japantown stakeholders. This includes our small businesses, our organizations, Buchanan hotel workers, and all who will be impacted by the sale. Through this process, we have identified the many vulnerabilities of our community, and I am calling on the city and our community to work together for the sustainability of Japantown. As a previous board chair of an organization that values empowering the community voice, I want to stress that we don't all have to have a unified message about why the sale shouldn't go through. That's what's beautiful about our community, is that we all have different reasons to fight for it. And at the end of the day, the community is saying no. So please
Thank you for your
listen
public
and respect
comment.
this.
Thank you so much.
Lori Yamauchi, and then Michael Howley. Lori, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I spoke at the last meeting, but I wish to add to my testimony from the last meeting. My name is Lori Yamauchi. I'm a third generation Japanese American and a resident of District 9 in San Francisco. Since the last meeting, more information has been provided regarding the planning approvals for the proposed project. It is my understanding that with the proposed use of Project Home Key funding from the state of California, this project is exempt from all planning approvals, including environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, as well as any conditional use authorization from the Planning Commission that would otherwise be required. Therefore, the only city approval needed for this project is the Board of Supervisors' approval of the purchase of the hotel site. The Project Home Key program also requires that the permanent supportive housing be restricted to persons experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness for a period of at least 55 years. Thus, if this project is approved with use of Project Home Key funding, the Hotel Buchanan Tourist Hotel would be removed from the Japantown community for 55 years. The Hotel Buchanan sits within the Japantown cultural and historical footprint. As was stated earlier, that footprint has been eroded by public actions in the last 80 years. As a result, the Japanese and Japanese American community was devastated, and only 3% of the residents in Japantown are Japanese or Japanese American. Therefore, Japantown's cultural identity hinges on the activity generated by the businesses and community-based organizations which attracts visitors. By converting the Buchanan Hotel to supportive housing permanently, the city would be striking another blow to Japantown by eroding its footprint yet again. The erosion of Japantown's cultural and physical footprint by this proposed project will cause irreparable harm to Japantown's fragile neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael Howley.
Hi, my name is Michael Howley. I'm a District 5 resident. I live 1 block away from the 730 Stannion site, and I support that project as well as this project and the other similar hotel acquisitions throughout the city. I think it's so important that everyone in San Francisco recognizes that we all need to bear responsibility for our most vulnerable neighbors. the people who would live in this supportive housing site are people. They would be neighbors to this community that they're able to stay in now as part of the short-term housing, but we have an incredible opportunity to give them a chance at long-term stable housing. Let them be a part of the community. Let them patronize the businesses. I hear concerns that you'd be losing a hotel, but you're not losing a hotel. You're gaining new neighbors, people who could be a part of the fabric of your community. And every neighborhood in the city needs to bear responsibility for this. And to say that we support housing, but not here, only gives other neighborhoods a chance to abdicate that same responsibility. So I really urge people to reconsider their opposition to this and remember that these are people we're talking about, people's lives, and we need to welcome them, or else we're all responsible for what happens to them when we ignore them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ben Nakajo, and then Richard Hashimoto. First is Ben.
Thank you very much. Ben Nakajo. I am a resident of Japantown and a volunteer for over 50 years. And I would like to tell a story. We came to America with our hearts were hopeful. Our labor was needed, but little did we know that we were considered vermin, pests, heathens, living with laws against us. We worked the land that we could not own. It blossomed under our narrowed fingers. We built small communities, were allowed to settle, and they became Japantowns. World event, the government turned on us. The hate comes under national security and based on the enemy race. No legal protection, laws denied, quietly obeyed, herded into concentration camps, losing everything. Returning slowly to our places that no longer belong to us, our Japantowns, but thriving communities, self-sustaining, stores, shops of every description, and everything that you needed. The powers came again, eminent domain, blighted neighborhood. Shelter redevelopment, no ifs, no buts, move out, get out. Homes taken, families scattered, businesses closed, lives changed, people thrown to the four winds. A few remaining businesses remained, returned, reopened, new shops, stores, began 50 years plus as a community retrenched, rebuilt. Now only 4 blocks remain. Now 3 Japantowns remain. World events, the pandemic. The powers come, the big law, this time emergency housing. We told you, we'll take what we want, you have nothing to say. Small businesses, the heart, lifeline of the community, depends on visitors. Taking the hotel will greatly negatively affect businesses and drive more into closure. In the strongest terms I have, for the sake of what's left of Japantown, KHP Capital Partners, take the Hotel Buchanan off the table. HSH, stop this community step-by-step destruction. City Hall, instantly stop this real threat.
All right, we're at time. Thank you so much, sir, for your public comment. We're at time. Thank you.
Richard Hashimoto, and then Ryan Kimura. Richard?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to go on record to clarify any statement or my statement that was printed in today's Chronicle. The statement that was printed is not what I said. I said the sale of the hotel would have catastrophic economic impact on the merchants. The merchants are the economic engine of this community that rely on tourism. We don't think that the sale of the hotel would not provide this and would force many merchants to rethink their business location. I also stated that the history of what the city has done to this community by taking 30+ blocks away from us and reneged on numerous promises that they made to us. This is what I said. Our press of Japantown has been oppressed for decades, and this is no different. Some of the speakers on today's meeting have no idea what we went through and suffered. We are on the brink of extinction. So please remove this site off the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan Kimura, and then Lois Scott. Ryan?
Good evening. My name is Ryan Kimura. I'm privileged enough to have been accepted, or I hope so, into this Japantown community. I'm a parent of a toddler at the preschool next door to the site. I'm a board member of the nonprofit but I'm also a member of the Japantown for Justice. I don't speak on behalf of any of these organizations. I speak for myself. So this Japantown community, it's a beautiful thing, full of life, energy, and hope, but built on the struggles and dreams of the Issei, Nisei, and the generations who have come before us. I feel like when Japantown hears, hey, the city wants to ... we quickly think, well, we don't trust them. They're making deals behind our backs, and this community process is just window dressing. So I too admit the trust levels of working with the city, pretty low. And the FAQ sheet that came out just a few days ago, appreciated, but if this whole process is to be fully successful, the city needs to step it up. And so to the city, number one, it's not good enough to say that you will suggest the 35 current employees get a shot at a job. That's just unacceptable. Number two, community benefits such as making up for the lost revenue for merchants is a must. Third, facilitating the transition of use with the community is a must. If you truly want the housing residents, AKA new community members, to be successful, then there's so much more that must be done. And to Japantown, the question really comes down to this: who is space being made for? Do we make space for hundreds or thousands of tourists? Or do we make space for folks who are looking to continue to get their solid footing? It comes down to value, who is and who isn't valued. Often money is attached to that. And we have to question who we think a real community member is and isn't. Will this take work on the community's part? Should this actually happen? For sure. But evolving, growing, and pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones is never going to be easy. And so with all that being said, sounds promising, but if the city doesn't step up and do what is right and equitable, then this will fail. And the Japantown community, which includes the residents of the hotel, will be the ones that suffer it all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lois Scott and then Dean Ito. Lois?
Good evening. I spoke before, so I just want to be very brief and request that the answers to the many good questions, the FAQ that was spoken of at the introduction to this meeting, that you make known to us where we can find the FAQs that are to be published. And at this point, I am fearing that the city may be abusing emergency powers to short shrift a good community process. Though it looks like we're extending the time, which is good, because I think there's much more to be revealed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Ito and then Bobby Lopez. Dean Ito, you have 2 minutes for public comment.
Thank you. Dean Ito Taylor, API Legal Outreach. We serve the Japantown community actually for over 45 years. You know, it's easy for city politicians and this department to look at the Japantown petitions and concerns as just another NIMBY response. And I could see that, you know, elected officials and department people just kind of roll their eyes. It's another, you know, not in my neighborhood kind of a response. But if you look below the surface, if you look beyond a quick judgment, you'll see a history of racism in this city that has, for the Japanese community, torn it apart time after time, generation after generation, from the stores that used to line Kearny and Grant Avenue as the original J-Town, torn out and closed because of the expansion of the financial district, to this concentration camps and then redevelopment, as people have described. We have had our homes and businesses taken from us time after time after time, all supposedly for the public good. And again, we are being asked to suffer another takeaway for the so-called public good. I mean, when is it that the city is going to look at the public good for the Japanese American community that has been part of the history of the city from the very beginning? The mayor came into office with an equity agenda. She wanted racial equity, but there is more to racial equity than just taking out statues or renaming schools. Racial justice demands that the respect and preservation of a district, the earliest and one of the few Japantown left in the country, that respect and preservation be made a priority in this process. Let's not take advantage of the poor little Japanese again, where we've been abused and suffered throughout history just
Thank you,
because
sir.
people
We're at
think
time.
we're
Thank you so much for your comment.
quiet.
We're at time. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bobby Lopez, excuse me, and Diane Matsuda. Bobby Lopez.
Thank you so much. Bobby Lopez on behalf of Todco. We're an affordable housing provider for over 50 years in San Francisco. You know, I didn't speak at the last meeting because I just wanted to sit there and hear, and I just acknowledge and hearing, you know, the history and the longstanding injustices. And I think that's really important to hold in this conversation. And I know that since we're early in the process, I'm wondering for upcoming speakers if there's a way to find a way of moving forward much needed affordable housing, but also get the long-standing needs of Japantown addressed. I know for those of us who support and advocate for affordable housing, the vibrancy of Japantown is also important to us, and many would unequivocally support city investment into Japantown. I also want to note that I think a lot of folks have said that, you know, the owner applied to the RFP, which means that they don't see the hotel as a long-term viable economic option. And if this hotel does go back on the market and is brought by a private owner, there is no community process as we have now. And so I think there's an opportunity here, and I'm hoping that, you know, dialogue continues on it. But I want to name that, you know, District 5, as many people have mentioned, has been particularly hit hard with the legacy of displacement. And here's an opportunity to actually house those folks who are on the streets and almost right or wrong redevelopment, because a lot of the unhoused people that I've encountered in my life in San Francisco are from Western Addition, are from this district. And I think that there's a way that we need to acknowledge that disproportionately it is folks of color, it is Black and brown folks that are on the street. Lastly, I also want to challenge the assumptions around the unhoused. I have seen amazing transformations when people have a safe place to call home. And I am concerned about the equation that somehow having a space for unhoused folks may harm businesses. If you go to 4th and Howard, we have hundreds of tenants there, including formerly homeless, and our housing has not impacted the vibrancy of Moscone Center. So anyway, thank you so much for your time, and I hope this dialogue continues.
Thank you.
Diane Matsuda, and then Carrie Hori. First is Diane Matsuda.
I'm Diane Matsuda, a District 5 resident and a community member. In 2019, the city passed the Office of Racial Equity, whose mission and purpose is to advance racial equity in the city and repair harm done by government policy decisions that have created, upheld, and exacerbated racial disparities in the city. In the ordinance's findings, it acknowledges that San Francisco has had a long history of creating and enforcing laws, policies, and institutions that perpetuate racial inequity in our city. It specifically notes that the San Francisco Police Department joined the FBI in conducting sweeps and helped to incarcerate thousands of persons of Japanese ancestries from their home right after President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. Japanese Americans were incarcerated in concentration camps in World War II, not because they were convicted of a crime. They were sent there because of their race. The ordinance's findings on the history of structural racism also call out that the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency used redlining and an urban renewal plan to raise homes, destroy businesses, and displace thousands of people residing in the Fillmore and the Western Addition. Japanese Americans were part of this constituency, and this was their second forced removal by the government. Now the city wants to purchase an important and vital piece of property in Japantown. HSH indicates in their FAQs that selection of the Hotel Buchanan was based on the physical characteristics of the building. No consideration was made or raised that this may continue to exacerbate a racial disparity against a community that clearly documents racial inequality. HSH's own equity plan states that it will incorporate a process to gather community feedback on projects that involve or will impact the community. The community has spoken through its online petition, its numerous letters to HSH and the mayor, and through the public comment process. We urge you to listen to us and help to repair the harm we have continued to face. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie Hori, and then Grace Horikiri.
Hi, I'm Carrie Horie from Pasadena, California. I'm a third generation Japanese American. I am aware of the homeless situation in all large metropolitan cities and the need for solutions. I understand that the hotel owners volunteered their property for the city's permanent housing program. It seems that the hotel owners did not consider the impact it would have on the San Francisco Japantown community. There are only 3 remaining cities in California that have a designated historical Japanese town: San Francisco, San Jose, and Los Angeles. It is critical for each Japanese town to preserve, maintain, and sustain its cultural and historical significance for past, current, and future generations. It was brought up at the last community meeting that there is a city ordinance establishing and maintaining the cultural and historical designation of San Francisco Japantown to not further denigrate the San Francisco Japantown community and to prevent the devastation that occurred with the redevelopment projects during the 1970s. Perhaps the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing needs to review that city ordinance before proceeding with the purchase of the Hotel Buchanan. As the community survives the current pandemic, the economy of the San Francisco Japantown needs to be supported. The loss of Hotel Buchanan will reduce the flow of tourists and tourist dollars to San Francisco Japantown. As a tourist to San Francisco and a Japanese American, I make it a point to visit San Francisco Japantown restaurants and businesses each time I visit San Francisco to support this vital community. Please do not complete the purchase of the Hotel Buchanan for permanent supportive housing. Please continue the dialogue to find a solution.
Thank you very much for your comment. We're at time. Thank you.
Grace Horikiri, and then Robert Falk. Grace?
Grace Horikiri, born and raised in Japantown. You know, tonight's meeting has a strong presence of those supporting the acquisition of the hotel. My work in Japantown includes keeping this community economically and environmentally thriving, you know, clean and safe. Now, since the hotel was turned into a temporary transitional home for the homeless, we've seen many changes, some, you know, subtle, some is pretty apparent, changes that many of you here probably don't see because you're not in Japantown on a day-to-day basis. We've seen increases in sharps, we've seen increase in drug-related crimes. So really, don't pit the Japantown community against the homeless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Falk, and then Kelsey Ju. Robert Falk.
Hi, my name is Bob Falk. My wife and I live in Japantown. We've been residents here for over 23 years. I used to be on the board of Project Open Hand. I have great concern about the homeless situation in the city and the need for the city to develop actions and new policies to better address it. I listened very carefully to the first meeting HSH held on this, and I was struck by all of the impacts that have already been seen in our neighborhood due to the temporary use of the hotel for housing for the homeless. Those impacts include effects on sanitation, on safety, on traffic, and so forth. There have been reports of drug dealing in the neighborhood. I was most struck by listening to all of our Japanese neighbors. I regularly shop in Japantown, and I know the history of Japantown. HSH has a single mission. It's a really important mission. It has the opportunity to spend a lot of money on a very important problem. But to ride roughshod over the city's broader planning process, to not consider all of the impacts, to not consider the city's existing plans in terms of Japantown and sweep all of that to the side for the flavor of the month, the immediate need is misplaced. Only the Board of Supervisors can stop this. Dean Preston, please Enlist your colleagues, demand a full impact analysis before this is voted on. Consider the history of this neighborhood. Consider the rule of, or the law of unintended consequences.
Sorry, sir, we're at time. Thank you so much for your public comment.
Our next speaker is Kelsey Ju, and then Satoru Hosoda. Kelsey, this is public comment. You have 2 minutes.
Konnichiwa. My name is Kelsey Fumiko Ju. I am the graduate student at Kansas University's Master's Program for Leadership of Diversity and Inclusion. And I am asking for community and for City of San Francisco to come together to find a better solution to this. What is at stake is there are 4 vulnerable groups. We have our preschoolers, our Kimochi Center citizens. We have our Japantown economic businesses, small businesses, and the homeless residents that will happen to come. We need to address all of these vulnerable communities. At the heart of this, the most vulnerable community is the preschoolers, because they fully depend on the advocacy of the community. They depend for food, water, shelter, and safety. They can't even wipe their butts. Let's be honest, we're still potty training here. So we must come together as a Japantown community to help them. If we're looking at these 4 vulnerable communities, they are also geographically at threat of harm and danger because we've mentioned the multi-generational trauma from World War II, being displaced and interned by San Francisco City and the federal government in the larger picture. We also have COVID-19 that has caused a pandemic and put our elders at risk. Let's exacerbate that by increasing the Asian hate crimes that have been hurting the elder folks. And then we're gonna add this permanent homeless shelter addition to that. It's putting unnecessary threat and danger onto the whole community as itself. So ultimately, here's what it comes down to. I'm a preschool alumni, and I gained some really great things from being at school. I got language acquisition because it's bilingual. I've used multilingual language to do accessible education programs as a National Park Service park ranger. I've gained cultural identity from frequenting all of the small businesses and the economy, and that hotel is key.
I'm sorry, we're at time.
help.
Thank you so much for your public comment. Thank you.
Satoru Hosoda, and then John Ota.
Thank you. My name is Satoru Hosoda. I'm a 3rd generation business owner, and the business was originally started by my grandfather in 1918 in the San Francisco, Japantown area. The business, since the original business, has changed in that we now import all foods from Japan. Our business was located at on Post Street, where the current Kabuki Hotel is. During World War II, we were incarcerated in a concentration camp in Topaz, Utah, where I was born, along with my friends and other friends who also were born in the Topaz camp. We returned to Japantown at the end of the war, but soon after, we were forced to relocate by the city of San Francisco. Japantown was and is my home, my family's home. The Japanese community helped my business and has helped other businesses in our area. The community was founded over 100 years ago. This is more than, it's a human issue. Yes, I agree with that. People have to have housing. But I will also say from a business standpoint, when you're basically reducing or making a community smaller for 131 rooms, where you've got so many businesses that are in the same area who have so many employees, I think that has to be taken into consideration. And as others have said, it's a very good idea. I think everyone has the thought of you want the best for your neighbors, you want the best for human beings. But I think in this case, you're basically marginalizing what has happened for over 100 years.
Thank you, sir. We're at time. Thanks for your public comment.
Thank you.
For the reason that you mentioned, which is I'm tired of you saying that I suck, but the lesser of two evils, only one.
Our next speaker is John Ota, but I think he muted himself. John, are you ready for public comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Hi, I am John Ota, and I have been involved with with Japantown since my family moved to San Francisco in 1963. Based on the testimony of August 26th and today, it should be clear that the proposed city conversion of the Buchanan Hotel into permanent housing for the unhoused is unacceptable and irresponsible for many reasons. But above all, because if implemented, it will present a threat to the safety and well-being of the 200 or so preschool and after-school students and their parents who are right next door to the hotel. We heard from a preschool employee that there have been about 1 or 2 hostile, potentially violent confrontations each month with people associated with the temporary housing at the hotel. We heard from a parent who was forced to hide himself and his daughter in the preschool to protect themselves from a man shouting racial epithets at them. Kathy Inamasu, director of the preschool, said that she was initially supportive of the temporary housing at the hotel, but that, quote, our staff constantly have to deal with people sitting or laying in our walkways. Sometimes they'll move politely, others will be aggressive and confrontational. There's been more garbage and trash, needles, feces, so we end up having to clean up all the stuff, end quote. Now, I don't blame the homeless for these incidents. I blame those who are responsible for caring for these individuals. As many have noted, housing is a fundamental right. But what about parents and children's right to safe childcare? What about our community's right to be free of racial hostility, threats, and violence, especially at this time when anti-Asian violence has—
Thank you, sir. We're at time. Thank you so much for your public comment.
I want to remind everyone that in order to give public comment, please put your name in the chat. We are not using the raise your hand feature. Just put your name in the chat. Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be Gary Kitahata and then Michi Toki. So Gary, you are first, and then Michi.
Hi, my name is Gary Kitahata. Japantown is my neighborhood of choice. I live outside its boundaries, but I come often for culture, religion, dining, shopping. I'm a member of several Japantown organizations, such as the Community Center and the Buddhist Church of San Francisco, and I've benefited from programs at Nihonmachi Little Friends and Kimochi. The updated FAQs state that this proposal would be a conversion allowed as of right and would not require any discretionary approvals by either the Planning Commission or the board. No CEQA analysis would be required, and this project is deemed to be consistent with the Japantown Special Use District, which requires projects to be compatible with Japantown's cultural and historic integrity, neighborhood character, development pattern, and design aesthetic. Those statements in the FAQs are all incredibly and absolutely wrong. The Planning Commission and Board should be presented with a social and economic impact analysis of how the decommissioning of the Buchanan Hotel will affect Japantown. If the redevelopment agency still had jurisdiction over this area, this proposal would have been savaged at public hearing and rejected by the agency commission. I say this with some certainty, having served as a redevelopment commissioner for 6 years. The agency in my time was committed to Japantown's preservation. That's the issue here, not the fact that this is a supportive housing project, which I think is a good thing. This project is not consistent with the city's current strategy to improve Japantown, which includes $25 million in park bond money for Peace Plaza and $5 million in state money for the Buchanan Mall. But even these efforts may not be enough for Japantown to survive in the future. This proposed project is not a step in the right direction, is not good for Japantown, and doesn't fit any of the criteria in the Japantown Special Use District. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michi Toki, and then Regina Sneed. Michi?
Hi, I'm Michi Toki. I'm Sansei, third generation Japanese American. For nearly 20 years, my husband and I have been residents of Japantown, where we're now raising our son. He's thrived at Nihomachi Little Friends from age 3 through elementary school, attended JCYC's Tomodachi camps, plays SF Associates basketball, and studies Japanese language in the neighborhood. His life, his identity continue to be informed and shaped by Japantown, the culture, our community. It's nearly impossible to voice opposition to this proposal without being characterized as NIMBY or anti-homeless. Supervisor Safai, regarding a similar proposal in his District 11, said, quote, "For anyone who would be resistant to it, I would say you can't complain about people living on the streets and not do something about ensuring they have housing," end quote. Ours is not a NIMBY situation. I resent being characterized as anti-homeless. That summarily discounts our legitimate concerns about the future of Japantown, our community. Please do not make this a case of you're either with us or against us. It's not what or who is being added to the community, it's what's being taken away from our community. According to HSH, Buchanan Hotel was chosen, quote, "due to its good condition and desirable amenities," end quote. Well, that building in good condition with desirable amenities is an integral piece of culturally significant community. It's in fact, it's that fact that seems to have been consistently overlooked. In her introductory statement at the last meeting, Director McSpadden made clear she was open to comments from our community, which she was, and remarked that it was, quote, "a really good reminder to me to hear and be reminded of the history of the Japanese community in San Francisco," end quote. Immediately I thought, if the director had to be reminded of Japantown's history from the start, how much consideration was given to the community when this building was selected for the program? And if today the director needed reminding about our community, what happens when the community and culture of Japantown are no longer supported, preserved, and protected?
Thank you for your public
reminding-
comment. We're at time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Regina Sneed? I saw you earlier, Regina. If you need help getting off mute, let me know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you unmuted me. Sorry, I thought you had control of that. I'm Regina Sneed. I'm a resident of the Sequoias, San Francisco, which is right adjacent to Japantown. And many of our residents here are concerned about this project. I have followed the discussions and looked at the tape of the last meeting. There are a couple of points I wanted to make from tonight's comments. One is the project home key money. I went on their website because I wanted to see where the source of funds that the city had for this project, and I found a press release dated October 23, 2020, which says the city was awarded $29.1 million to acquire a 130-room property. It sounds an awful lot like Hotel Buchanan. So I wondered if people could comment later on that. That's quite a while ago, and we only found out about the project really in August. So I'm wondering about the timeline there. And the second thing I wanted to mention is we had Buchanan Hotel. It was, Japantown was suffering during the pandemic. That property owner had an opportunity to contribute to the city with some temporary homeless housing, and probably then was on the city's radar for this request for proposal for permanent supportive housing. But I wonder if the city, using its equity lens in terms of the Planning Commission resolution last year about that, took into consideration that maybe there was another opportunity for the city to look at that property to enhance its commercial use as a hotel in support of Japantown businesses. And that's where you have two ideas, two different spheres in the city that perhaps weren't talking together about this need. And I'm hearing from the community that these concerns about equity, inclusion, looking at the past historical significance of Japantown are not getting the same level of attention perhaps as the homeless. And it's
Thank you
bad
very
they're
much.
competing.
We're at
It's bad
time.
they're competing,
Thank you
but
for
I
your
hope we can
public
work
comment.
out something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next group to speak is Buchanan's Workers. So everyone in the Buchanan's Workers will have 2 minutes. Please just let me know when the last person has spoken. So next up is Buchanan's Workers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jose Lee. I'm United Local 2 representative of these Buchanan's Workers. We are thank you very much for all your kind work and supporting the Buchanan's Worker. We are very sympathetic with the homeless problem, but we believe that eliminating good jobs in the community will not be a solution for these workers that has been there working for more than 25 years. If you eliminate these jobs, they are gonna become homeless also. So I don't see any solution on that. Thank you for everybody who is supporting the Buchanan workers.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Bessie Godoy. Trabajo en el Hotel Buchanan.
Good afternoon. My name is Tessie Voloy and I work at the Hotel Buchanan.
Estoy trabajando ya hace 15 años, en la cual este trabajo ha sido el sustento de mi familia. He sido una madre soltera.
Un momentito, déjame decir lo que dices en 2 oraciones, por favor. She's been working at the hotel for 15 years and it's the survival for her family.
Bueno, soy madre soltera, ¿verdad? De mi trabajo dependen de mis hijos y también pues es una gran ayuda sobre la aseguranza médica que nosotros tenemos, ¿verdad?
I am a single mother and it's very important for the survival of my children and also having the health insurance.
Y les voy a poner un ejemplo. Por ejemplo, yo tuve el año pasado un accidente de mi hijo. Si no hubiera sido por la aseguranza que nosotros tenemos de nuestro trabajo, no sé qué hubiera sido porque tuvo 3 operaciones en su cabeza.
I'm going to give you an example. Last year, my son had an accident and he had to have 3 operations on his head. And without the health insurance, I don't know what we would have done.
Ha sido, bueno, algo terrible. Y ya con esta noticia que nosotros tenemos de que van a cerrar el hotel, es algo preocupante para todos nosotros los empleados, ¿verdad?
And now we get the news that they're going to close the hotel. So all of the employees are very worried.
Y que, bueno, de nuestra edad ahorita, pues no estamos ahorita para retirarnos ni nada de eso. No sé
And we're not old enough to be retiring.
qué va a ser de nosotros. Todo ustedes están hablando de que de fuente de trabajo, que van a haber, pues no va a haber fuente de trabajo porque ya nosotros.
What's going to happen to us? You guys are talking about having other sources of work, but where are we going to get the sources of work?
Prácticamente quedamos en la calle.
We're practically on the street ourselves.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Để có tất là
你好啊，我係傑根尼嘅酒店一個員工，我就好需要 keep 翻呢份工啊，因為啲仔女又細個
One second, please. We need a Cantonese interpreter, Bryn, please.
All right, all set, thanks.
Wait, can I ask him to say again, please?
你再講一次啊！我個名叫做靚， 我喺酒店呢間酒店就做咗大概都7年嘅時間。
My name is Len. I have been a worker at this hotel for approximately 7 years.
然之後我而家個年紀咧，仲即係到退休嘅年齡仲差好遠，所以同埋我好需要 keep 翻繼續喺呢份工。
To become eligible for retirement, I'm still has a long way to go. Have a long way to go. I really need to keep this job.
同埋屋企2個細路仔都好細個，同埋好需要 keep 翻呢份工，賺啲錢去俾個 mortgage 個費用啊，同埋屋企其他個費用啊，同埋其他帳單個費用啊，包括車啊、上網費、電話費，總唔知就好多費用要交。就我就好唔同意City 去購買呢間酒店，購買咗我哋酒店，包括我，包括幾十個員工都失業失去工作。
I have 2 kids that I have to raise. I also need this job in order to have income to pay for mortgage, and there are other bills that including car payment that I have to pay. And I very much disagree with the city that the city want to buy this hotel, and the result will be that several tens of our workers will lose their job and their livelihood.
Thank you.
講。
Hello， 大家晚上好。
講大聲啲。
大家好。
How are you doing?
我名叫做Long Wang。
My name is Long Wang.
咁我喺Hotel Buchanan 做咗4年。
I have been a worker at this Hotel Buchanan in the past 4 years. I very much like this job.
我係唯一一個收入喺個家庭，有2個細路。
I have 2 kids and I am the only breadwinner within my family.
同埋都需要有好嘅醫療保險。
And this job also give me a decent health insurance.
希望可以繼續可以喺度做。
So I very much want to be able to continue to work here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Alejandra González. Nuevamente vengo a hablar a favor de mis compañeros de Hotel Bucaras.
Déjate preguntar.
Sorry, hi, good evening. My name is Alejandra. Can you tell me, dime otra vez tu nombre, perdón?
Alejandra González.
Alejandra González, and I came here to support my coworkers.
Estoy escuchando muchos comentarios que hablan acerca de igualdad.
I've been hearing a lot of comments talking about equality.
Mi pregunta es que si fuéramos iguales, las personas que están buscando un hogar trabajaran como nosotros, trabajadores de Hotel Bucanas, trabajamos diariamente todos los días.
My question is whether people who are homeless, if they would work as hard as we do every day at the Hotel Buchanan.
Todos los trabajadores de Bucanas venimos temprano a trabajar.
Everybody who works here works very early.
Pagamos impuestos.
We pay taxes.
Y la ciudad solamente está enfocada en buscar hogar para las personas que no trabajan y nosotros, la comunidad ni los trabajadores somos responsables de las malas decisiones de esas personas.
And the city is only concerned about finding homes for the homeless and not helping the people who are taxpayers and working.
Yo pienso que no debería ser aprobado la decisión de vender Hotel Bucanas porque afectaría a la comunidad japonesa como a los trabajadores.
I don't think that they should approve the project of the Hotel Buchanan because it's going to affect the workers as well as the Japantown community.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank everybody for your support. I believe that it's not a good idea to eliminate good jobs in the community and throw all these workers out on the street. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Our next speakers, excuse me, will be Steve Suzuki, and then Susan Ju and Ray Ju. So first is Steve Suzuki.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll start out by saying that my work life has been in affordable housing and supportive housing for over 40 years as an architect and community designer. And I've actually been on both sides of the equations where I've had to present to NIMBYs about, you know, not providing housing and that unhoused folks, their rights and all that, they're a threat. I feel like this process is putting myself in competition with myself, but I think it's to say that this process is a community trigger. The fact that all the history of the redevelopment evictions and the camp evacuations, the comments that you're hearing are clearly about that. And I think a lot of this is that the process on this was flawed, right? You're pitting us, and I really resent being pitted against communities. It's been said before. I don't think it was a on-purpose thing, but the city, how this went about is problematic. And I think that really has to happen is, I think as Jennifer Friedenbach has said, this is not an either or. And again, don't pit us against other communities. It's not about that. We understand that this process needs to be stepped back and looked at. I think there's definitely questions that haven't been answered. I've seen it in some of the chats, clarification of what is permanent supportive housing versus homeless housing. I think a lot of these responses are in response to a homeless situation. It is, but transitional and permanent is different. I think we have to have that conversation, as well as I think there's a density issue going on with a specific building that needs to be addressed. So I really think that there are solutions. Our community can do that. We have a lot of skill sets. We have a lot of experience, but don't just step on us like has happened in the past. Like I said, this is a trigger moment for our entire community. And that's what some of this backlash is really about, is that this process was not handled very well.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Susan Ju and Ray Ju.
Hi, this is Ray Ju. Thanks for the opportunity to speak again tonight. I am a parent of 2 kids that are alumni of Nihamachi Little Friends. They did a great job, and thank you for that, Kathy and team. I'm also the IT project manager of Sutter Health that was responsible for the design and construction of the Mission Burnell New Hospital and the Van Ness Gary campus. With that type of knowledge and experience, I'd like to offer another option for consideration 4 blocks away from the 1800 Sutter proposed facility. 4 blocks away on 2333 Buchanan and Clay is now the closed California Pacific Medical Center campus. All of the acute care facilities, which is comprised of in excess of 130 patient bedrooms, have been relocated to the Van Ness and Gary Hospital. This offers a turnkey solution to house people in rooms that already have bathrooms, that have lobbies on each floor, fully ADA compliant, multiple break rooms that can be easily turned into common kitchens, as well as laundry facilities, a cafeteria, a loading dock that's off-street, parking, in addition, an emergency room that is no longer being used that can be turned into a clinic to serve the people that are living there. In addition, around the corner at 2324 Sacramento is another facility that California Pacific Center no longer uses. That is an inpatient psych facility for behavioral health to address those that would need that type of services. So I'm offering another option to consider right above Japantown, 4 blocks
Thank you,
away
sir, for
at
your public comment.
2333 Buchanan. Thank
We're
you
at
very much.
time. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sandy Mori, and then Steve Nakajo. Sandy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandy Mori. I'm the president of the board of directors for the Japantown Task Force. And last evening, we had a special board meeting to address this particular issue of the Hotel Buchanan. Our board of directors unanimously voted to oppose the sale of this hotel at 1800 Sutter. Because it would basically take away one of 2 hotels in the area that cater and serve visitors and tourists. Our mission of the Japantown Task Force is to protect, promote economic development, and preserve San Francisco's Japantown. And San Francisco Japantown is only one of 3 remaining in the United States. Japantown in San Francisco has been the historic, cultural, and traditional home to the Japanese American community in San Francisco and in Northern California. San Francisco Japantown, over 115 years old, has been subjected to government policies that have chipped away at our geographic area. During World War II, our community was incarcerated in 10 concentration camps. I was born in one of those camps in Tule Lake, California. Prior to World War II, our San Francisco Japantown consisted of 40 blocks, 200 thriving businesses, and home to Japanese American community. Then, during redevelopment era, another forced removal, urban renewal. And again, people were forced to leave, lost their homes and their businesses. So we in our community have empathy for the issue of the homeless plight because we were ourselves homeless 2 different times.
Thank you very much for your public comment. We're at time. Thank you.
I'm going to
Denny,
start.
Denny, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Steve, you are next. And then Haruka Rodabush. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to be able to say that I officially get to be able to identify myself as the executive director of the Japantown Task Force, Japantown Cultural District. In terms of that, at the last juncture of this issue, I was a public member of the community, but now stand with our board of directors in terms of the opposition to the sales. Sandy Mori talked about, and many speakers talked about, the historical injustices that occurred within our community for generations. Part of my participation with Sandy Mori was 45 years of serving as the executive director of Kimochi Senior Center that had an opportunity to work with these Issei's and Nisei's, first generation, second generations, Japanese Americans in Japantown, one of 3 left in the United States. San Francisco's Japantown, the historical first community in the United States. So for us, in terms of our community, it's not a matter of a discussion. And personally and privately, in terms of the support, in terms of the issue and responsibility of the homeless, I feel all San Franciscans should share that as well. But also in terms of supportive services, people in the community and the members on this phone call have got to understand and hear that for 17 months and still currently, that hotel was serving residents in terms of homeless. We, Japantown Task Force of Japanese Community Benefit District, work with Providence as a service provider. We have been supportive of this issue, still in terms of not being informed, but being supportive with that. The issue in terms of permanent site talks about, again, for us, the passion of 115 years that you heard our community talk to. in terms of what we had done to us with the ripoff of camp experience, with the total destruction of the redevelopment experience, to a point now where, again, the city and county is telling us through a good cause concept that this program is not a good fit in terms of our cultural district, in terms of our JHS product.
I'm sorry, we're at time, sir. Thank you so much for your public comment.
Very much.
Thank you.
Haruka Rudabush, and then Mari Matsumoto. First is Haruka.
Thank you. My name is Haruka Raudbush. I am the Senior Programs Manager at the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Northern California, which is just 2 doors down from the proposed site at 1840 Sutter Street. So that's where I am at this very second, actually, joining our Zoom. So I, as a member of a community organization here in Japantown, as someone who made a deliberate choice to change careers to work to serve this community, I'm deeply invested in the preservation and sustainability of Japantown as a community. And so also as someone with progressive values and ideologies, it's very, very difficult to weigh the seeming choice that we've been presented with to choose between the preservation of our community and the lives of people that are living in the streets. And I really resent being put in this position. And I think that, you know, my hope is that we can find a solution that, you know, can hopefully be amenable to not only, you know, our community's concerns about whether or not we can survive something like this, but also to find a compassionate solution to accommodate those with the most acute needs in our community. That being said, I want to add my voice to those that are calling for a more comprehensive and definitive set of information for our community and our leadership to make decisions on, namely in an economic impact report. And so I really hope that in this whole process that we can find out exactly how this project would impact our businesses and our community, and use that information to come up with better solutions for us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mari Matsumoto, and then David Darling. Mari Matsumoto.
Hello. I do acknowledge that there's an urgent need for shelter in San Francisco for the homeless population. However, this proposed conversion of the Buchanan Hotel at 1800 Sutter is a poor fit for this purpose, given its location next door to a preschool and 2 doors down from a community center that serves youth and seniors. The Nihonmachi community has faced 2 major threats to its existence. First came the forced removal of Japanese Americans in 1942. My parents and their families were among those forced out of the community. And the second time was during the redevelopment phase of the 1960s and 70s, which resulted in another upheaval. But the Japanese American community persevered through these trials, and new organizations addressing some of the community's unmet needs formed to provide services to seniors and young people. Both Nihonmachi Little Friends and the Japanese Community Center of Northern California have made commitments to invest in Japantown and to promote the community's survival. What better way to ensure a community's continued viability than to bring in children and families? In addition to using the services these organizations provide, their clientele patronize local businesses as they eat in the neighborhood restaurants and shop in the local stores. The hotel similarly helped bring in tourists who likewise contributed to the local economy. I'm not sure how the city's plans for the hotel's conversion will help the neighborhood, and setting up a false dichotomy of Japantown versus the homeless can only lead to an increase in anti-Asian violence. I hope that the city will give consideration to the community's concerns and to do its utmost to preserve one of the 3 remaining Japantowns in the United States. Thanks for hearing me.
Thank you.
David Darling, and then Noah Sloss. David Darling.
Thank you. My name's David Darling. I'm an architect who's lived in San Francisco and for over 33 years, and 18 of which have been in Japantown. First, I think it's really important to understand that the opposition to this proposal is not at all about homelessness. I think it's sad that the opposition is being stereotyped as anti-homeless rhetoric. I volunteered much of my personal time and my firm's time and resources to homeless causes and the needs of the underserved in San Francisco over the years. I generally support the other three proposals, and if this proposal were just a few blocks away, I would support it as well. This property is in absolutely the worst location for this proposal. First, it's next to a preschool, which is in a landmark building. It's been there for 45 years. It's in Japantown Special Use District, Japantown Cultural District, and the Commercial Business District, all of which exist explicitly to preserve and protect cherished cultural and economic resources. For over 10 years, I've participated in workshops to help the mayor's develop the mayor's JCHES report. This proposal flies in the face of all that work. To be clear, this is not an either-or proposition. Again, I'm all for the proposal in even a slightly different location. It's not what it contributes to resolving homelessness, but what it takes away from a fragile cultural district. Instead of an active commercial street front, something that the commercial district code mandates, we have a dead street front with a security guard, not to mention the problems that have been mentioned about the preschool next door. The past year has been a beta test. It's an offensive location. It's offensive like the internment and displacement of this community in the 40s and again in the 60s and 70s. This proposal is not about homeless charity, but about corporate charity. It bails out KHP Capital and Kempton with our tax money instead of finding sensible, appropriate housing solutions within the broader context of San Francisco's planning guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Noah Sloss, and then Mike Lago Marcino. Noah?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I live in the neighborhood, and my kid went to Nihomachi Little Friends. And when I heard about this project, I was like, wow, I wish it was not right there. But thinking about it some more, I mean, when I used to walk my daughter home from there, we would see homeless people wandering around the neighborhood, like having a bad time, people sleeping on the sidewalk, just decomposing, and, you know, having to explain that to her. It's not, so this project is the way to get homeless people off the street. This, as other speakers have said, this is the best way to help people experiencing homelessness. So, and I'm aware of the history of the neighborhood and the history even of Nihomachi Little Friends, how they had to fight to get their building back after World War II. I think the city should work with the Japantown community to make sure that it works for everyone. But I have seen this rhetoric of people that are not, pretty obviously not part of the Japanese community, people that look more like the Pacific Heights community, using the same rhetoric about the need to preserve the history and the injustices of the past. That seems really gross to me. I support this project. I urge it to go forward, but I really think the city should work with the community to make it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Lago Marcino, and then Kei Gamo. Mike? Mike, now is public comment. You have 2 minutes. I'm sorry, missed you, Mike. Feel free to put your name back in the chat. Our next speaker will be Kei Gamo, and then Samantha Wang.
Hello, I speak to you today as a Japanese American San Francisco resident for almost 30 years as someone whose elderly mother lived in Japantown, as a former union steward, and as a family physician working in the Tenderloin district. I absolutely agree we need more supportive housing in San Francisco, but this is not the right location, and I'm strongly opposed to this proposal. I fear that many considering this proposal are not familiar with the painful, shameful history of racism against Japanese Americans right here in San Francisco. The illegal incarceration of Japanese Americans and Japanese in San Francisco during World War II, and then the forced destruction of San Francisco's well-established Japantown during the city's redevelopment projects in the 1960s. This painful history resulted in shrinking San Francisco's Japantown down to a few blocks. Now, what remains of Japantown, a vibrant part of San Francisco, needs to be protected and preserved. It is a destination for Bay Area residents and tourists alike. I reviewed the updated frequently asked questions about this proposal from yesterday, and I am still very concerned about safety with possible supportive housing residents with active substance use and unstable mental illness. I ask that you respect and support the Japanese American community and not destroy it with this proposal. I ask that you protect the children at Nihon Machi Little Friends Preschool and the vulnerable seniors at the community center. I ask that you not go through with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Samantha Hoang, and then Frank Riley. Samantha?
Hi, my name is Samantha Wong. I'm a resident of Japantown. While I'm not Japanese and today a VC in the tech industry, I've not forgotten my roots. I'm a daughter of a Chinatown mother and former Asian American historian, so I'm very familiar with the history of depredation and exclusion by governmental officials on Asian communities in the United States. The city is doing exactly what they are doing to Chinatown right now with Japantown. That is, try to kick out the Chinese, and when they realize that that's not feasible socially or economically, they make Chinatown, just as they are doing with Japantown, reliant on tourism. And now today with this project, SF is about to potentially destroy Japantown, on top of the history of internment, on top of the history of removal and displacement, on top of the history of forcing the community to be economically dependent on forces outside its control. This project makes clear that this city does not give a damn about the Asian American community in San Francisco, let alone its union workers. That's why I'm speaking out today on behalf of the broader Chinese American community in solidarity with the Japanese community. Racial violence has skyrocketed in the last year, especially against Asian seniors. I myself have been attacked for being Asian on the streets, and now the city wants to build a center project for right next to a senior citizens home and a preschool. Of course, I support the need for services and housing for the homeless, but not at the cost of a community that has historically been attacked again and again. Let the record reflect any city officials who are seeking to shuttle the process without any public comment is not a friend of the API community. And let me further comment, I've been very appalled by the members of the HSH, especially in the last town hall. I saw them shaking their heads, smirking at comments, cutting off speakers prematurely, and I still see the vehemence with which they treat the Japantown community and affect the API community. The fact is that there is not one API person in the leadership, and if there were, I would bet 100% that your team would have known how culturally and historically insensitive this project is. So shame on you.
Thank you for your comment. I'm afraid we're at time. Thank you so much.
But the broader API community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank Riley, and then Nick Rothbacher. Frank?
Hi, I'm speaking for Frank Riley. He's sitting next to me. He doesn't like speaking in public forums, but when we first heard of this project, we live nearby. He had an immediate reaction as an immigrant, as someone that's grown up in Ireland and has been marginalized by the government. His immediate thought was, this is a silencing of the community, and it really resonated for him. And we started talking about what are the solutions and why does this feel so weird? And part of it was just how quickly this came down, how people didn't know about the project, it felt like it was being snuck in and there was very little consideration for the community. Additionally, we're small business owners and we know a bit about construction, about real estate in San Francisco, and we're aware of it. There are entities like Lennar that own huge tracts of land where prefab housing can be put in, where there can be facilities so that we can treat even more people. So we just don't understand why a luxury hotel should be helping people when there are actually other larger tracts of land where we could actually have more impact. Additionally, it feels as though the homeless population is being put in as one population, and it doesn't really discuss the mentally ill or the people who are addicted to substances. And we've personally seen this on our street, an uptick in number of people that really don't seem well. And we're concerned. We also don't like this whole pitting of, if you're pro the housing in Japantown, pro the facilities for the homeless, that you're anti-Japantown, et cetera. It just feels really divisive and it just feels not very transparent. And so we're opposed to this project, and we think there are more appropriate venues where more people can be served. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick Rothbacher and then Andrew Day. Nick?
Hello, yes, I am a District 5 resident. I live in the Haight, and I just want to say that I support the project, and I'm happy with you at HSH are doing, and I'm really reluctant to let this money go to waste, not buying a vital resource for housing our homeless neighbors. And I just want to say that I appreciate the concerns of everyone in the community, but as a community member myself, I just think that the people who are on the street are in much greater danger than the general concept of the neighborhood might be. So I support the project. I just want to see it purchased as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Andrew Day and then Rumi Okabe. Andrew?
Hi there. My name is Andrew Day. I'm a District 5 resident living just south of Japantown in Western Addition. Part of what attracted us to this neighborhood was all the great shops and restaurants north of us in Japantown. And while we absolutely love this area on a daily basis, we see unhoused people who are desperately in need of our help. And these hotel rooms have the opportunity to vastly improve the lives of many people who are our existing neighbors, who are currently unhoused, and who exceedingly need the roof and the support this project will provide. We as a city have failed to provide sufficient affordable housing to meet the needs of our residents, and I think it's the responsibility of all of us to rectify the situation we're now in. And this is a fleeting opportunity to increase our city's stock of affordable housing. We absolutely cannot pass it up. I certainly cannot speak to the long history of what the SF Japantown community has gone through in the past. However, I can say that I do truly care about it, having an opportunity to continue to thrive and grow. And, I'm resoundingly in favor of any support the city can provide to ensure its long-term success, as well as helping ensure the employment opportunities for those who might be affected by the sale of the hotel. But I also think it's critically important to the future of this community and the city to make space for new neighbors in need. I hope that we as a community could open our neighborhood to new neighbors with welcome arms. These aren't criminals or undesirables. They're people who are desperately in need. And so I, again, want to say I fully support this project and hope we can move forward with it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Rumi Okabe and then, I'm sorry, Takeshi Moro. First, Rumi.
Hello, my name is Rumi Okabe, and I am a Japantown property owner. My maternal grandparents owned one of Japantown's first hotels on Geary at Buchanan 100 years ago, and my mother was born there 99 years ago. My paternal grandfather was sent to a prison camp in Bismarck, North Dakota at the beginning of World War II because he was active in the Japantown community as an officer of the Nichibeikai, a community organization that still exists in Japantown today. My two sets of grandparents and my parents have left me and my family a legacy that is San Francisco's Japantown. I feel that it is our responsibility to fight for anything that contributes to our community's longevity and prosperity. Our Japantown is in a fragile state, and San Francisco itself is in a fragile state. And I understand that the city's homelessness agency stands for compassion, courage, and common sense. But the Buchanan Hotel, changing from a bustling hotel with enthusiastic tourists from around the world, changing to supportive housing, is a serious step in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Takeshi Moro, and then Larissa Leaf.
Hi,
Takeshi.
my name is Takeshi Moro. We live in Bayview, and I am also a board member on Nihon Machi Little Friends, the preschool right next to the potential hotel sale property. As I said, I live in Bayview, and we live right on the block where supportive housing and services are. And as neighbors, we work together, and we have some difficult situations, but we live through it. And I think it's mostly worked out in my neighborhood. So this is, I just want to tell you that it's not a NIMBY. I don't come from a NIMBY standpoint. And I want people to stop conflating two separate issues here and stop pitting two marginalized communities against one another. I'm going to bring this point up again, which is that you need to be familiar with the Japanese American history and the experience. If you're not, I urge you, I plead you to go and listen to stories of how folks endured the concentration camps in 1940s. I bring this up because I looked at the HSH FAQ on your website, and it seems to me that you have bullet points after bullet points on the quality of the building, the features of the location. That's great. We get it. But you do not address the historical injustice. You have one paragraph for that. And my thing is, did you listen to our comments from last time? Because it seems to me that conveniently those things are not addressed. And a lot of people say history repeats itself, and I don't think that's true. I think history rhymes, you see. It's much more pernicious than that. Every time history is a little bit different enough that you can say, oh, this is different this time. And I want to bring up the concentration camps. I want to bring up the urban renewal that you promised, which never actually came out right.
Thank you very much for your public comments. Thank you.
Larissa Leaf and Augie Phillips. Larissa.
Hi. As a resident of District 5, I just want to say that I support this project and buying the 1800 Sutter Hotel. The Shelter-in-Place Hotels program has been a vital way to provide housing to our homeless neighbors, and it would be extremely unjust to evict these residents simply because the pandemic is in a different phase. Housing is the only cure to homelessness, and it is a failure of our government and the city that we allow people to continue sleeping on the street. Buying this hotel is a great investment towards ending the homelessness crisis, and it would be a terrible thing to waste this opportunity with continued delay and indecision. Please approve this project as soon as you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Augie Phillips, and then Mary Kate Bacalao. Augie. Augie Phillips, this is public comment. You have 2 minutes. I'm sorry I missed you, Augie. You are welcome to put your name back in the chat. Mary Kate. Mary Kate Bacalao, now is public comment. You have 2 minutes.
Jenny, I think she put her comment in the chat. I think you could move on.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Cynthia Gomez.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cynthia Gomez, research analyst at Unite Here Local 2, who represents the hotel workers. And I wanted to address a few points. One is there is a lot of comments about how to support the workers. The 32 jobs that would be eliminated are good jobs because workers have fought and organized over years for them. And what they would lose is retiree health care and a pension to support them through their retirement. There simply are not enough good union jobs out there that correspond to what someone gets after 25 years of service, especially when the industry is trying to slash jobs left and right, especially if somebody has limited English, has limited formal education. We need to get rid of this illusion that there will be a way to make those workers whole. There won't be. Also, the narrative is that the entire hotel industry is suffering, and that may be why this hotel is up for sale. KHP Capital Partners, the owner of the Hotel Buchanan, just this morning bought the Le Meridien Hotel for the pre-pandemic price of $221.5 million. The industry is not suffering, the workers are suffering. So we need to hold that in our hearts and minds when we understand this. I also want to close by saying that people who have to live outside are our neighbors, they are our siblings, our sisters and brothers. They're not dangerous, they're not scary. People who suffer from mental health are more likely to be the victims of crime than the committers of it. And when we speak about people who have to live outside, it is very important to speak about people who have to live outside with the respect and dignity that they deserve. I myself suffered a tremendous upheaval in my own life and was a few supportive family members away from homelessness. I want to underscore that this is a very good program. You should house as many people as possible. And please pick any one of the hundreds of hotels in the city that do not provide good union jobs for their members so that you're not harming one community while you're uplifting another. This is a very good.
Thank you very much for your public comment. Thank you.
Peter Hirschberg, and then Kay Gamo. Peter?
Hello, I'm Peter Hirschberg. I'm a Japantown resident for 15 years. Our district must provide supportive housing. Creating an inclusive community is our legacy in San Francisco, and as Amy said at the top of this call, it's the defining issue of our time. My concern is that this project may go against everything that we know about urban and economic development. I've worked with communities around the world on new businesses, on housing. I've written books on the subject, worked with the Obama administration. The hotel is an essential part of the Japantown economic engine. It's a fragile economy that was really nearly destroyed by the pandemic. This one property represents half the hotel space and a key part of the event space and congregating in the neighborhood. You know, some folks say, well, just relies on tourism, but let's look further. That's not an unsustainable thing. Japantown draws in wealth from around the city, from surrounding counties and the world. It's generative. It's what makes jobs possible. What, 13 million to the city alone, 45,000 guests. Very few locations can be this jewel to lift the community up. If we remove it, we'll likely increase evictions, certainly have more business failures and more homelessness and poverty. We don't need that. Now, you might not agree, but it turns out when we talk to the city about let's do an economic analysis, they resist it. How can you consider killing something off and creating more poverty and homelessness when you don't even do the analysis? This could lead to economic and cultural genocide in our community, and rapidly. Some folks say the hotel isn't viable, but when we talked to KHC Capital, they simply said they wouldn't talk to us. I'm on the board of the city's economic development agency, and we have people from around Asia who would love to invest in this property, free up the resources to go elsewhere, and I invite our community to work with the city to rapidly find an alternative site so our neighborhood can support supportive housing and our economic engine can support the city. Let's make San Francisco great. Let's not be Texas dumb. Let's work together on this.
Thank you very much, sir.
Kay Gamo and then Michael Morris. Okay.
Yes, this is Kay Gamo. I already spoke, so I will defer to the next speaker. Thank you.
Michael Morris and then Chris Noma. Michael.
Thank you. Yeah, I've moved away from Japantown area recently, but I lived there for 8 years. I would walk from Japantown down to the Tenderloin almost every day. And you see homeless people along pretty much every portion of that area. You see people on Sutter and Laguna. You see people on the stairs on Webster. You see people by the Sequoias. To imply that the needs of Geary and Polk, which is only 7 blocks away, are really that different from the needs of this hotel or this community. I mean, this is all the same community at the end of the day. And I think this hotel would be a really great investment in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Noma and then Scott Hamaguchi.
Hi, I'm Chris Noma, and I oppose the conversion of the hotel to supportive housing because doing so will severely negatively impact the Japanese American community. I've read the general plan referral prepared by the Planning Commission recommending this project. While it is dated September 1, it appears to have been written without any consideration of the concerns of the community, the businesses or the people who actually live and work in Japantown. In finding that the project is in conformity with San Francisco's general plan, the report makes the following erroneous findings. The report finds that the project will have no impact on the neighborhood serving retail users. I challenge that finding, as the loss of a tourist hotel will be devastating to the small businesses, which have restaurants where hotel guests will patronize, and gift items from the stores in which they will purchase. Multiple small businesses have already closed due to the pandemic. The return of hotel guests is critical to the survival of the remaining businesses in the area. The report finds that the project will preserve the existing neighborhood character because there are no physical changes to the building. I quite frankly find that unbelievable. While physically there may not be a change, the use will completely change the character of the neighborhood. The loss of the hotel and replacement with supportive housing with no cultural connection to the Japanese American community will destroy the vitality of the area. The hotel is at the foot of Buchanan Mall, a pedestrian walkway with Japanese restaurants, bakeries, and shops. The hotel enhances and promotes the cultural connection of San Francisco with Japan. The report finds that the service sector will not be displaced, but that finding is directly contradicted by the displacement of at least 30 hotel workers and the shuttering of other businesses, which would result in the closure and loss of employment for workers. The Planning Commission referral report clearly failed to take into consideration any community comments made at the last meeting and tonight. The report must be rejected as no community input was taken into consideration at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Hamaguchi and then Ahmad Sino.
Thank you. My name is Scott Hamaguchi. I live outside of San Francisco, but I'm a 4th generation Japanese American and a board member with the Japantown Task Force. As someone who visits Japantown regularly, who stays at the hotels, I plead with you to say no to this proposal. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I thank the HSH for all the work that you're doing. I do think that you guys are tackling the single biggest problem in San Francisco today. But I do think part of what you do has to be looking to the future and thinking about legacy and protecting the city and its inhabitants well beyond your tenure. And on these calls, you've been hearing from 3rd and 4th generation Japanese Japantown families and small business owners. And when you're in your conversations, in your meetings, I hope you're thinking 3 and 4 generations into the future as well, right? Because even though you guys have great intentions for this property, do you really know what's going to happen 20, 40, 80 years from now? Even though you may go out and find very good contractors who are friendly to Nihomachi Little Friends and take the community into regard when they're managing the property, can you guarantee that that will be the same case when that contract renews? Will the same people be at the city? Will the city even be in a financial place where they can take a bid from a community-friendly service provider, or will they be forced to just go with the lowest bid? So you've heard that there's a long history of well-intentioned political decisions that have absolutely destroyed Japantown. And I hope that as you guys are talking about this, you think about 3 and 4 generations down the road, what is going to be the impact of this decision? I understand it's an extremely complex issue. I hope that you reject it, but I know it's not that simple. So I hope that you take the time, you do the work, and you actually think about how is this going to impact things, because this could be the straw that breaks the Japantown's back. And I really hope that you do the work and you do the studying to make sure that that's not the legacy that you're leaving behind. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ahmad Sino and then Jan Bolafi. Ahmad. Ahmad Sino, you have 2 minutes to speak. Jan Bolafi and then Erica Sandberg. Jan Bolafi. Jan Bolafi, you have 2 minutes to speak. Erica Sandberg, and then Mark Moriguchi. Erica, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I am a San Francisco journalist who has written extensively on this subject. As a reporter, the lack of response when I requested detailed information from HSH has been an embarrassment to you as a city agency, but also to the city of San Francisco, because you apparently represent us. There is zero transparency here, none. Now, obviously, I'm opposed to the sale of the Buchanan Hotel. The conversation about this subject, I'm finding, is disingenuous at best, and it's coming from the top, you guys. You imply that all the people who would be placed are seniors. All? Most? A few? Prove it. You won't. What is the demographic makeup of the people who might be in this building? What is the requirement for how long somebody would be a San Francisco citizen? Is it 1 year, 2 years? Be specific. You won't be specific. Fact, most people on the street in San Francisco today have very serious drug and psychological issues. Look around. It is absolutely absurd to position the people who you see suffering on the street as those who were recently employed and working and in a home, whether tenancy or paying a mortgage. It is complete nonsense. Almost all need very serious health care. This is not a hospital. This is not a rehab center. There is no sobriety requirement. There is no 12-step program that is set up within this system. Permanent supportive housing. There is no support within it. It's smoke and mirrors. And when I asked about it, the public information officer, Denny, I had received the vaguest of answers. The deception is deep. Everyone is being bamboozled. Crime and squalor has increased outside these hotels, and the good neighbor policy is totally fraudulent. It doesn't work.
Thank you so much for your comment. We're at time. Thank you.
Mark Moriguchi, and then
Hello.
Rumi Okabe.
Hello, I am a accountant in local Japantown area, and I'd like to bring up the financial tax considerations that I don't believe HSH has considered. I believe there are other sites that are more cost effective and have better financial impacts. First of all, the hotel is, it has a high tax base, and because it's recently traded hands, currently has a property tax of $503,135, which over 55 years equals $27,672,000. That's public record. The hotel tax is not public record, but from the occupancy rates and the average room rate, rack rate, it's probably between $1.4 to $3 million a year, which is over 55 years, $77 million. So that's over $100 million in lost tax revenue if this hotel is taken out of hotel service. Also, there's tax revenue from sales taxes from out-of-towners, and also the possible loss of convention money because there'll be fewer hotel rooms for conventioneers. And there are other SRO hotels do not have to pay the hotel tax. Long-term stay dorm rooms don't pay the hotel tax. So there are other alternative sites that will probably not have such a high tax base. And this may be short-term beneficial in terms of low refurbishment costs, but there will be this lost tax revenue that of $100 million over 55 years. I don't think refurbishment is going to be that cost effective. And the 77 million comes from out-of-town people, not the San Francisco residents will have to be taxed to replace this money. So
Thank
the
you very
city
much for
should
your
be
public
doing
comment.
an
We're at
overall
time.
determination of what is the tax loss, comparing it to other hotels.
Thank you very
that
much for
may
your
have
public
much less of a
comments.
tax loss and much less of a hit to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rumi Okabe, and then Carol Ito.
I already spoke. Thank you.
Thanks, Rumi. Carol Ito, and then Steve Marzo.
I wrote in the chat room. I'm not planning to speak, but I've made some comments in the chat room. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Steve Marzo, and then Raul Maldonado.
Thank you. I would like to start by saying we should reject the premise that supporting homeless people in your community is a burden and is a cost and is something that we should avoid. I live across the street from a building in San Francisco that is for low income and very low income people. And it's great. It's got a playground. It's, you know, it's clean. The folks there are very considerate. I would not consider it a burden to have it in my neighborhood. This ultimately would make the community safer. I refuse to believe that San Francisco doesn't believe in a housing first solution to homelessness. We need to set the example for the rest of the world. You know, our community is known for being compassionate. If it isn't going to be us, then who's it going to be? You know, what city in the country has this level of, you know, progressive values? I guarantee you that every community will have very similar reactions. You know, it doesn't matter where we end up putting this place. And I would hope that folks would think about their family's history or their history of being discriminated upon and would consider what it would be like to experience that today. And that's what the folks living on the street are experiencing when folks are shunning them to the side and not allowing them to be housed next to them. I would also consider maybe allowing for another hotel. You know, we can do both. But please, I'm in strong support of this project. I hope you guys could be too.
Thank you.
Raul Maldonado, and then Joel Matsura.
Hi, my name is Raul Maldonado and currently live in San Francisco, District 11. I've lived in SF for 5 years. I'm calling in support of this project. In particular, just this question of, is Japantown defined by a hotel or its people? Is Japantown shaped by its culture or walls, right? Keeping this building, we can easily see it abandon the Japantown community quite easily as it's a big business compared to growing and nurturing the culture and community that is eroding. And I've seen different sub-communities erode in the past 5 years in SF, particularly in the Fillmore, somewhere nearby, a culture that's definitely eroded due to misfortunes by the city government. Now, currently, we're doing the correct, the city is doing corrective measures to ensure the integrity of the culture is there and bolster it going forward, right? There's that in mind. And I really want to reemphasize this again is, do you want to have the short-term influence of a building walls, or do you want to grow and innovate and multiply the Japanese community with integration of SF civilians. And that's all I wanted to say. And then, of course, hopefully you're all having a great evening. I truly understand the concerns of the Japantown community. I made a awkward YouTube video trying to depict and capture Japantown's history in the past during the pandemic. And I truly do hope with the integration of these folks in this housing that Japantown could continue to grow. Because I too, I don't want to see it go away. I want to see it grow, be nurtured, and something more and spread out within the SF community. Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Joel Matsura, and then Kim Herbst. Joel?
Thank you. Our family is a fourth generation San Franciscan family. We're also fourth generation Japanese American. Our family was interned out of this neighborhood, and then with redevelopment was also moved out of this neighborhood. My children are now back here in this neighborhood, going to school, attending all of the events, both at the community center and at the various schools and Rosa Parks Elementary across the way, across the street from Geary. And I really resent the sentiment that being pro Japantown and striving to retain our culture is somehow NIMBY, is somehow anti-homeless. We can absolutely do both. We've heard some comments where there are other sites within District 5 that could work. There was another speaker mentioned something 4 blocks away. I think the issue is we need to retain our cultural district, and let's not pit one marginalized group that was interned, that was then forcibly moved during redevelopment. Let's not continue marginalizing the Japanese community and pitting us against each other, because I've not heard one single Japanese Japantown comment that is anti-homeless. And I think it's really important that we listen to our API community as well, and we listen to our homeless community and find a solution that helps everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim Herbst. Kim Herbst now is public comment. You have 2 minutes. Raymond Whitley is our next speaker. Raymond?
Hey, how you doing? Hi, I'm speaking for Raymond Whitley. Hi. I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. I am in favor for that housing for the homeless. I'm a native of San Francisco, lived in the Fillmore district since 1966. We've been displaced, marginalized, discriminated against upon. I think as people, we need to come together, regardless of who was there first or whatever. Those people deserve habitable, safe living conditions. And we have to put aside our own personal feelings and house these people, help these people. This is what God has us here on earth to do, is to help one another and stop discriminating against each other and come together. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Paul Verk, and then Christina Magee. Paul, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me okay, Danny?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just trying to turn on my video here, my audio here and video. Just want to quickly say that I adamantly oppose the purchase of this property. I believe I'm qualified to make such a statement because I've lived 1 block away from the property for 32 plus years now, along with my Japanese wife of 18 years. I've listened for the last 2.5 hours to people say things that were brilliant and some things that are a little bit shocking, but I walk past that property every day and have for decades. And yesterday I measured it out. It's exactly 19 steps from Nihon Machi Little Friends Community Center, where I've had to stand before to try to keep some homeless people from trying to get in the door, which has happened on numerous occasions as previously mentioned. And so without dwelling on all the negatives, I just want to say that this is the wrong place to build it. To emphasize or to underscore the positives, some absolutely brilliant things were said from Dr. Gamo to Buchanan Works, but in particular, I'd like to applaud David Darling, who's an architect, and definitely Ray Ju, who's a architect as well, but rather than just taking shots at it, he's offering a solution. CPMC, which I've been to too many times in my 3 decades, is essentially vacant now, is probably 5-10 times bigger, far better equipped. It's away from the cultural intrusion of the Japanese Japantown. And I think we just make an ultimately perfect substitute for this project. From Michi to Michiko to the ICU nurse, absolutely brilliant, Samantha Huang.
Thank you very much for your public comment. We're at
Yep,
time.
and thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina McGee, and then Christopher Mika. Christina?
Hi, my name is Christina McGee, and I'm a Yonsei 4th generation Japanese American, San Francisco native, and current resident.
My video didn't come up. It came up every time I hit on it.
This proposal jeopardizes Japantown as a neighborhood and tourist destination. As someone whose family survived internment and redevelopment and sees how those times devastated both the community and Japantown, this proposal continues government efforts to endanger our J-Town. J-Town is one of the only 3 remaining Japantowns in the U.S. and needs additional support, not this community. I'd also like to thank the community for speaking out. Otsukaresama deshita and arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christopher Mika, and then Kanisha Roach. Christopher? Christopher, you have 2 minutes for public comment. I'm sorry we missed you. Kanisha Roach?
Good evening. My name is Kanisha Roach, Director of Operations with the Providence Foundation of San Francisco. We are the current community-based organization here at Site 36, and I'm with 2 clients that are actually current living here at the Kempton Buchanan, better known as Site 36, and they would like to say their piece.
Hi, I'm Annabella Bush, and I'm client here at Buchanan in Japantown. And I'm just asking for my standing point where I was at 12 months ago out of one of the shelters here in San Francisco because of my situation with my income being homeless. So now that I'm here at the beginning, I'm just saying that it has improved my situation, and I'm looking forward to moving on beyond the Buchanan. But up until today, I'm just looking at that I'm being taken care of by wonderful people that I grew over 12 months and that I found out before the pandemic, and a lot of them have came from the shelters where I was at, and I'm just being thankful that I had this opportunity to pass on what I learned about people helping my situation out in a lot of different fields. And Japantown is a very excellent place to live.
Hello? Oh,
Hi, we can hear you.
I'm Francis. And I 30 minutes. I've had everyone from time to time what they'll be getting into. What I'm just looking at, I'm looking at an investment, you know, what's the community will be living away if they don't actually get themselves into this. But what I'm saying is, you know,
Thank you for your comment. Denny?
Our next speaker will be Sam Heft-Luthi and then Evan Oski. So, Sam, you have 2 minutes. Sam Heft-Luthi, excuse me, I'm sorry. Now is public comment. You have 2 minutes to speak. I'm sorry, we missed you, Sam. Evan Oski and then Ryan Gilmore. Evan?
Hi, I'm Evan Oski. I'm a resident of NOPA here in District 5. I'm strongly in support of the city acquiring Kempton Buchanan. I believe housing is a human right, and we need permanent housing for thousands of people who are currently unhoused in the city. And I've been to community meetings like this in other parts of the city, in the Bayview, in Soma, and elsewhere. And there are always reasons from neighbors and businesses why some location is not ideal and why this has to go in some other neighborhood, in some other place. And I agree that this is not ideal. It's not ideal that a hotel room is the best housing we can offer someone. It's not ideal that we have to scratch and claw for state and federal funding for housing. But if we wait for the ideal site, we'll continue to leave thousands of people to sleep on the street. And we have to make do with the very few opportunities we are given to house people. So I urge city officials to go forward with this plan. And I urge that every effort be made to preserve the jobs of the current hotel employees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan Gilmore and then Patty Dobro. Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan Gilmore. I'm a resident of District 5. And, you know, I just want to express my support for the sale of the hotel. You know, I want to express my compassion to the residents of Japantown and to the Japanese American San Franciscans who have shared their feelings on the matter. And I understand that it's not an ideal situation. I still believe that housing is a human right and we need to support our homeless neighbors. I'd also like to express that I'm extremely disappointed in some of the comments made by other San Franciscans who show no compassion to our homeless neighbors on the street. I'm someone who has struggled with mental health issues and addiction, and only by the support of loved ones and my own privilege have I avoided many of the worst outcomes. And I believe that we should do our best to see the humanity in all of the people that are living on the streets of San Francisco right now. I know there aren't ideal, there's no perfect answers. I really think we should take this opportunity to house our homeless neighbors at this time. Thank you. I see the rest of my time.
Thank you.
Patty Dobro and then Paul Osaki. Patty? Patty Dobro, this is public comment. You have 2 minutes. Our next speaker, I'm sorry we missed you, Patty. Our next speaker will be Paul Osaki and then Joshua Hart. Paul?
Hi, thank you. I just want to say it saddens me that people who live in homes and who have roofs over their heads imply that the Japanese American community, as if we are insensitive to the needs of the homeless and supportive care. No community understands the issue of homelessness more than our community. The government put over 120,000 of our community members homeless. Just a few decades ago, the city forced thousands of Japanese Americans out of their homes in Japantown, then forced over 200 businesses to close. They didn't go out of business. The city forced them to close. Now the city is saying we need to do our fair share again. How much do we need to give, and how much can the city continue to take from us? It saddens me that those who have never had their homes taken away continue to ask our community to keep giving by sacrificing the income of our small businesses. 40 to 50,000 tourists lost a year will make a difference. Japantown in the Western Addition has one of the highest density of low-income senior and housing in the city, and it's because the Japanese American fought alongside the Black community during the redevelopment to make this happen. We fought against the city, and HSH knows this, and it's one of the reasons why they want to place it down here. Well, I say we gave our share. We already gave. I live across the street from the largest in Japantown, over a block wide and 2 blocks up from 2 others. Enough is enough. We've given our share. We've lost our community block by block. We've given up our homes before. We understand what it's like to be a homeless community. We are left a homeless community more than you'll ever know. Housing is a human right, and I'm asking the city to finally get it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joshua Hart and then Gregory Richardson.
Hi, my name is Joshua Hart. I have some ties with Japantown. My wife, Sobachan, lived there for a long time before she passed away about 10 years ago. And now our 2 young daughters have that area just as kind of their one connection to their heritage in this town. And it's, so I just want to add my voice to the people that are in opposition to this plan. I understand HSH has a thankless job, and this property seems like a slam dunk for all the reasons that have been laid out. But I don't see this as an NIMBY thing. This really is, you're not adding the housing, you're removing that hotel and all the economic activity that it brings to this struggling little community. I just want to make sure that this doesn't kick off some chain of events where Japan Center goes away and gets replaced by even more housing, maybe expensive condos, something along those lines, so that my daughters don't get to keep Japantown as that connection to their heritage. So just want to see that if we do go through with this, that impact analysis is done, that we have actually really thought through what's going to happen to the area, because I am not opposed to having this kind of housing, but I am opposed to having the community erased because of it. And I know there are a lot of places that are going to say NIMBY. Not a lot of communities are as fragile as this one. There are a lot of areas, Soma, Mission District, where you drop one of these in those areas, they're not going to be erased like Japantown might. So that's basically my main reason for being opposed to it. We need that economic activity from those hotels. We cannot afford to lose them. That's my say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gregory Richardson and then Daniel Vernick. Gabriel? I'm sorry, Gregory.
Gregory, you're on mute. Gregory, you're on mute. Denny, can we go on and come back?
Yeah, I apologize, Gregory. I can see you. We'll come back to you once you have your speakers. So next is Daniel Vernick and then Gabriel Goffman. So Daniel. Daniel Vernick, this is public comment. You have 2 minutes. Gregory, do you have your microphone working again? I'm sorry, we still can't hear you. Gabriel Goffman. Gabriel Goffman, this is public comment. You have 2 minutes. So that's the end of my list. I'll need a moment to catch up in the chat. I see Wendy, no last name. Wendy, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. Hello, my name is Wendy. I am a 39-year resident of San Francisco. Married for 30 years to a native San Franciscan. I live in District 3, about 8 blocks from where Japantown is. My best friend lives about a half a block from the hotel in question. And I just want to say, speak in support of the acquisition of this hotel. Since I'm not, okay, because my best friend lives a half a block from Japantown, I very frequently come by at least once a week, sometimes 3 times a week, okay? And I just want to reiterate to people who are concerned about this the small business. I love small businesses, and so tourists does not power the cultural district. The locals do, locals like me. As far as the 32 workers that work in the hotel previously, I have a possible solution. The Office of Civic Engagement has community ambassadors. Okay, one of the things that they do is they provide escorts to residents and people who visit. What if we would it be possible to have a community ambassador program such as this, who provides escorts to people, as well as to support the preschool that's next to this hotel. Anyway, that's kind of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speakers will be Carissa Bieletsky and then Peter Hosey. So Carissa.
Hi there. Thank you very much. My name is Carissa Bieletsky. I'm a registered nurse and resident of San Francisco for over 20 years. I live on California Laguna, which is about 2 blocks from the hotel. I oppose the change of the hotel from making it into long-term housing for the homeless, specifically because of the lack of transparency in screening process. And I believe that there are better hotels that can be chosen, and that this isn't the right choice in the right community for what is being decided. This is going to create a subculture within the Japantown that's going to ultimately change and potentially destroy what is Japantown and what it creates in San Francisco and the community itself, which has already suffered so greatly historically. I don't think that it's the wise financial district for San Francisco or anything. I have a lot of fears around what happened in the marina when the hotel was used and the motel was used to house the homeless during COVID and what it's done to that area in terms of violence, drug use, and crime. I do believe that homelessness in housing is a necessity and a human right, but I also believe that we need to address the underlying issues that go along and provide. Those things also need to be addressed hand in hand with housing, not only housing. It needs to go hand in hand. And there
Thank
needs to
you.
be also rules.
We're at time. Thank you so much for your public
Thank you.
comments.
I appreciate the listening.
Thank you.
Our last speaker will be Peter Hosey. Peter, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And I think there are some people in the queue after me. My name is Peter Hosey, and I live in District 5 within walking distance of the hotel location. I am calling in strong support for converting this hotel to permanent supportive housing. If you don't want to see unhoused people living on the street, the way to get them off of it is through supportive housing. I'm dismayed by the number of comments that have been fear-mongering about unhoused people. There is nothing wrong with housing people near a school. Unhoused people are not inherently dangerous. I would also point out that the hotel is not operating and that the owner is looking to sell. I don't think the hotel reopens and stays open permanently is an option on the table. If you think it should, you'll need to make that business case to the hotel's owner. To people saying we should use other sites, I say yes, we should use those too. Opposing supportive housing is supporting homelessness. There were 8,000 people living unhoused in the city as of the last pit count in 2019, possibly more now, and we are desperately behind on supportive housing to get them off the street. I disagree with folks who say that people should be left to live on the streets of Japantown. I say that we should help them get back into a regular life. I agree with the calls to give the hotel's workers jobs in the new facility. We should never see housing for some pitted against jobs for others. Part of leading on this issue and resolving this conflict must be ensuring the hotel's workers continue to be employed either at the new facility or in some other capacity. I call on my supervisor, Dean Preston, to do that work to keep these workers employed to resolve the conflict. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. We will now turn the meeting back over to Executive Director Shireen McSpadden.
Thank you, Deborah. So I just want to, I realize not.
I was trying to speak since long time ago, 2 hours ago.
I'm sorry, sir, we're at time right now.
Yeah, many of us are trying to speak.
I know, it's so unfair. What is wrong with this meeting?
So my name was put 2 hours ago and waiting for speaking. So you never call my name. So I see you calling a bunch of other people, putting the names, you don't call my name. So what the hell? What's going on with you?
Shireen, did you want to make your comments?
This is so wrong. You don't even have an.
So I'm sorry, I was about to say, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance for everyone to speak. I think that what we can do is send out a way that people can make their comments to us. We absolutely do want to hear from everyone, but this is a 3-hour meeting. And that was what we said we would be able to have tonight. So I do apologize for people who did not get to speak, but I just wanted to make a few comments. And I guess the first one is, I want to thank all of the members who came out tonight. I know that this is a very, very serious issue for everyone. It's complex. I want to thank especially the.
Shireen, you're on mute. You just muted.
Sorry, somebody muted me. I want to thank especially the members of the Japanese American community who came out to speak and really talk about the concerns about the cultural district. I absolutely agree that those are really important points, and we need to figure out how we as a city are supporting the Japanese American community. I've worked with many of you for many, many years, you know, close to 30 years, some of you, and I want to hear that and want to work with you. I also want to thank people who came out who have experienced homelessness or who are providers who've worked with the homelessness population, because I think we have a lot of myths to dispel, and I know that you're working on dispelling those myths. And I believe, along with you, that people who have experienced homelessness are our brothers and sisters and family members. Absolutely agree with that. I want to also say that the permanent supportive housing is a best practice. It's known as a best practice across the country. It's not shelter. It's really different. It puts somebody on the path to stability and does allow those people to be neighbors and friends just like we want them to be. And I know I've lived in communities in San Francisco where I've lived very close to permanent supportive housing, and it works very well. But it works when we put all the supports in place that need to go along with it. So that actually, I mean, that's a very good point, and people brought up some good and strong concerns. I want to thank the people at the Buchanan who got to speak. I'm sorry we didn't get to completely hear what you had to say, but it was really helpful to hear from people who have had stable housing during this time. And I mean, I think, you know, and also the workers. I mean, again, there are a lot of things that would need to be in place to make this work or make any other permanent supportive housing space that we're trying to work on in San Francisco. We're trying to focus on geographic diversity because we know that people who experience homelessness live across the city. And I also really deeply believe that San Franciscans are some of the most humane people in the country, and that we can figure out how to make this work. We may not, you know, we need to continue talking about whether it's here. We need to continue talking about whether it's in another part of District 5. But, you know, this from a standpoint of HSH is a really good opportunity. And the other thing that I want to say is, you know, this part, you're right that this came up very quickly. And part of the reason it came up quickly is because during COVID, we found ourselves in a real crisis where we had many, many, many people in the street, and we had people living in shelters, and they weren't safe because of COVID. And we had to figure out how to do something quickly. And the state made it possible, and the city and the mayor made it possible for us to move people into hotels, and it worked because tourism was down and the hotels really needed it as well. And so this, the reason we have this funding from the state right now and the feds is because tourism is really in danger right now. And so we put out a request for information, inquiry rather, to find hotels that were interested in working with us. And we got a lot of them, and we're vetting that list right now. And this was one that came up first. And so, you know, we're going to continue working with the community. We're going to continue listening in the various ways that we do. And I want to just kind of close it out by thanking everyone, despite where you are on this issue. You know, San Francisco gets where we do when we have open and honest conversation. So good night, and we will continue figuring out ways to hear from those who didn't get to speak.